Now, as we look ahead, former presidential writer for George W. Bush, Ned Ryan, he is now CEO of the conservative training organization American Majority, and also with us, Democratic strategist and former executive director of the Correct the Record super PAC, Isaac Wright. He is now a partner with the Forward Solution Strategy Group. Now, guys, the president says there are many bipartisan deals to be done in the new year. I quote again, because he says we can do bipartisan health care, we can do bipartisan infrastructure, we can do bipartisan DACA. Isaac, is the president right?
Well, look, Democrats have been at the table for months, waiting for Trump to come to the table and negotiate. And when he has even thrown a hint of that, he's done it in bad faith. Right? Remember back in September when Trump worked with Democrats to find a fiscal funding formula and pass a vote on that. At the same time, he alluded to by the end of the year he would work with Democrats for a solution to the DACA crisis, and he didn't come through on it. We have seen this president break his word time and time again. Through his continued efforts for repeal and replace, we've seen his adamant effort to throw 23 million Americans off their health care. We've seen his xenophobia. Right now, we know who Donald Trump is because he told us. If we don't listen, it's our fault. We have to be prepared to negotiate and win the best deal, but with no blinders on.
So when you look at that list, again, health care, infrastructure, DACA, Ned, of those different things, which one would you be most comfortable with if you saw the president reach out and make a deal with Democrats?
Probably infrastructure. I mean, it's definitely something that could be addressed in a bipartisan fashion. I, of course, get a little nervous when he talks about $1 trillion infrastructure plan, and unless there's corresponding cuts in foreign aid, you know, that makes me nervous to add to the deficit. But I think that'd be the starting point, because you'd think we could get enough Democrats to agree our country needs infrastructure. However, I'm not really sure anything will happen in a major way in 2018, because I think 2017 kind of laid the groundwork. I thought that there might be some of those red state Democrats like Joe Manchin that might be willing to negotiate on the tax bill. And Trump even said in this New York Times interview he was willing to negotiate on the SALT deduction if the Democrats had come to the table. There were no Democrats that came to the table on that front, so I'm not really sure when we get down to the details how many Democrats are going to come across the table and talk about infrastructure even. But I think with DACA, I mean, Trump laid this out in the tweet, but he also laid out in this interview. His supporters want a wall. They believe that there should be a wall, and if there's no wall, there's no DACA. And I think that's going to be very hard to get Democrats to come across that on that issue to say, we will fund your wall at $22 billion if you'll give us DACA. I just don't see that happening right now.
Well, Isaac, let's ask you about that, because I will say, though, there are other members of the president's own party who really want to see the DACA legislation happen, that those dreamers be protected, including Jeff Flake, who voted for tax reform because he was guaranteed some kind of deal on DACA. But to that point that was just made there, Isaac, is this like make or break for Democrats? Will this red line be something that they can't refuse because it's so important to protect dreamers?
I think Democrats are prepared to work on the DACA issue with Trump and the administration. They have called for comprehensive immigration reform. They've called specifically for fixing the DACA issue.
But about the wall, because the president's red line is the wall, saying there's no DACA deal without the wall.
The president promised Mexico would pay for the wall. I guess we're all waiting to see the check come through. But I also want to go back to something that Ned said just a minute ago about Democrats not being at the table on tax reform, and remind him that Chuck Schumer sent an open letter to Trump and the Republican leadership that said Democrats are ready to negotiate. We have two principles. One, we don't want to add money to the deficit and saddle our kids and grandkids with debt for tax cuts for the rich, which Trump did by over $1 trillion. And they said they wanted tax cuts for the 99%, not the 1%. And as we all know, 50% of the value of the tax cut in its first year goes to the wealthiest 1%, 80% at the 10-year mark.
On a couple fronts, though, Isaac, first of all, that whole issue of deficit spending, I guess I'm kind of curious to know where Democrats were when Obama added $9 trillion to our debt over the last 8 years, and all of a sudden they become deficit hawks. I will agree with you, however, on that second point. I was frustrated a little bit with that tax bill that there were not more concessions made to small business and to the individuals. I felt that it cheated towards the corporate, so I would agree with you on that. But going back to the first issue, I think Trump understands his base. One of the top issues that he ran on and that he won was they expect a wall, not a virtual wall, an actual physical wall. And so I see this as a bright red line that Trump understands. He's willing to negotiate. And again, that's part of the art of political compromise, is saying, I'll give you something as long as you give me something that I really want. And it's going to become push and shove. How badly do the Democrats want a DACA compromise?
We will see.
They're only going to get it if there's a wall.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Isaac Wright, Ned Ryan. We'll continue your conversation during the break. We appreciate it.
Thanks
Before
so
we go, a programming note. We've got an epic New Year's Eve planned for you here on CNN. You'll want to tune in. Anderson Cooper, Andy Cohen hosting CNN's New Year's